How can we empower this person to be more of who they are despite what they've gone through in their life? And not look at traditional health issues, as communications, as information as to what the person's going through and what they have gone through, and not look at it through a lens of bad. Look at it through a lens of opportunity.
And just information.
And information. Feedback. And be grateful for the feedback too.
Well, we're so often not grateful for the feedback.
No.
We usually are looking at our bodies going, why are you doing this to me?
The body becomes the enemy. And for a lot of people, their mind becomes the enemy. It can be very challenging living in this world for many people. But a lot of people haven't been supported properly through the system that we give them. Just talking to someone through traditional talk therapy just really isn't enough. And that's when I kind of stumbled into chiropractic. I started working for a lady called Dr. Carly Axford, who came up with a technique called spinal flow. And that's where I went, okay, there's something really beautiful happening here. And not just in terms of their physical health. Whatever happened on the table happened in life and vice versa. You wouldn't see something on the table that hadn't occurred in their life. It was just this beautiful mirror almost, and just an opportunity again to connect to what actually matters. It sounds strange, but for anyone who's ever been on my table, hopefully you understand what I'm saying, is you connect to the real meaning of life instantly. Everything else just fades.
And so what you're now practicing, you've called
Spinal Energetics.
Yeah. And explain a little bit more to the person that's listening that's like, what the hell? And, I don't know how you do that actually, but that's why you're the creator.
You actually can't. I do my best, but it's always a disservice to it.
Yeah.
It's difficult to understand something that's not necessarily as tangible as other experiences.
So would you say you're moving energy around the body?
I would say what we're doing is we're working with the person's innate intelligence, their innate energy.
Because if I watch when you're actually practicing and what that looks like, some people would say it looks like an exorcism.
Yeah,
like
they do.
What is actually happening.
Yeah.
You are moving energy through the body and specifically the spine more than anything.
The spine, and we are working with specific tension pattern points that are specific to certain things as well. So it's not just sporadic movement that we're looking for. We're looking for cohesive movement.
But you're not touching someone.
Sometimes, but most of the time, no.
And they're having a reaction or
Correct.
they're physically moving in response to your...
Well, because we think if we have to touch the physical body to get a physical movement, and that's from that same idea that we end here. We don't. We do have an energetic field, and we're working in the field, and in the field there's different layers of the person and of their experience in this life, and so we can work within those layers to then engage that innate intelligence to then express itself in a different way. So I'm not necessarily making them move at all. What happens is I'm connecting to that same part that created that tension pattern, that created that experience. And then that intelligence is actually what's shifting them.
But they're not then just responding to what? Energy.
It's a difficult thing to really nail exactly what
because
they're responding to.
They're not necessarily in control. The movements that they're having, they're controlling or not. That's right.
It's almost like, you know how you might get a cramp in your leg and you stretch it out?
Yeah.
The cramp is something that the body's telling you as information, but you still actively stretch it.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that, the dance between the conscious and the unconscious. There's a dance between that same information coming through, but it's not just working on that physical layer, because some of the movements people are making just to send it back to the nervous system might be a fight or flight response. So you'll see people kicking their legs, for example. That's information that's them trying to flee a scenario that they never were able to flee before. But what I love about this work is they don't necessarily have to relive it mentally. So their body memory is releasing this, but they don't have to go through that moment in time again where they wanted to flee.
So unlike talk therapy where you'd sit there and you'd talk about it over and over and over and leave just as traumatized as how you started.
Correct.
Which I actually do think is what happens.
Yeah,
I mean, it's great to talk about things and get it off your chest, but that's the whole point is you're supposed to get it off your chest and leave it
there.
Leave it there.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We're not taught to do that.
No.
And so really what you're tapping into is the body's memory of that experience and releasing it.
So I believe that the body is almost like a timeline. It's almost like a fingerprint. It's unique to you, and everything you've gone through in your life is within you. Right. And you want that. You don't want to forget everything you've gone through. It'd actually be really horrible if you woke up one day and did.
And people would argue that things that have happened to them are good, bad or otherwise, but I think it's all working to move you in a direction.
It has to. Look, when you've experienced both, as most, I would say everyone listening has, even during the most painful moments, including the most painful moments in my own life, even now I don't know if I would take it back. A lot of grief studies say and suggest that majority of people wouldn't take it back. They wouldn't take back the most hurtful things that have ever occurred.
That is very interesting because not everyone, I think, has the awareness to be able to, especially in the moment, sit in it. I try and not react to things. I try and separate myself from a situation. But that's because probably too many times I've put myself in the same situation.
To try and be equanimous about
right.
it. Yeah.
So now I'm like, okay, I can see it. Let's just not react. I don't know what to do with that now. I've been thinking about having this conversation with you because I'm like, I've definitely been able to separate myself from the experience and try and take a bird's eye view and not respond or react straight away and just sit there. But I guess that's still part of it. But if I'm not reacting, am I not absorbing, or am I still absorbing that and still experiencing it?
I come to the same thing sometimes.
Because I'm not numb from it, right?
No, but we're also taught in a way like neutralization or being equanimous with everything despite what it is the goal. And I don't necessarily think that's the goal either. I think it's important to express sometimes too. A lot of the time, even the spiritual, more self-aware people I work with, they've kept a lot inside and they're actually quite repressed because they're trying to be neutral about it and not react to everything, and therefore as a result are actually repressing. What we want is optimal expression and optimal non-expression.
And to move through emotion.
And to move through it and be okay with actually the sometimes people just don't respond, and that's actually a people-pleasing situation as well.
Sure.
Because if I express my true feelings, then consequences can exist. I like to have the response match the context. If life stimulus is an 8 out of 10, I would like to think that I can give around an 8 out of 10 response. The challenge is when we've gone through a lot in life and we're hypervigilant, or we can go the other way as well, and we're starting to respond to little things that are really 1 or 2 out of 10
triggered,
experiences,
so we're idling,
and we're at a 10.
Just our nervous system's idling.
Either way too high or no response at all when we should be responding more. Just because something happened 10, 15 years ago doesn't mean that your body isn't experiencing it still to this day, even if you did do talk therapy. The talk therapy is working with the mental component. And also what you said before about avoidance, that avoidance feeling is why people don't necessarily want to try this work as well. There's a fear around it, a fear of no longer being able to avoid having to face. They're nervous about what could come up on the table. And they know what could come up is the things that they've necessarily maybe do not want to come up. But that's when we reassure them that they're not specific trauma moments that come up on the table, but maybe feelings, maybe certain emotions that they've not wanted to feel possibly can come up.
What about storing trauma physically? Can that show up as, I'm assuming, pain?
Very much so.
How else is it presented?
It can present in many different ways. So things like fibromyalgia, for example, psychogenic seizures seems to be something that's more on the rise. So there's an array of different things that the body stores metaphysically to express. Some go really deeply into it. Like if you knock your right toe, that means you're scared of the future or whatever. I'm probably not quite there. Not to say it's not true. I don't know what is true or what isn't. But I'm not completely down that end either. Like not everything's a sign. Sometimes you just whack your toe. The things that I really love are the cases where they've had all the traditional things looked at and nothing so to speak, is wrong traditionally. They're in back pain. They can hardly function, just as an example, but your x-rays come back normal. They'll start sending them to like a pain clinic or something like that, kind of more that we don't really know what's going on. The idiopathic kind of pain disorders, which basically is a fancy word for we don't know why you're experiencing that.